informing people.
Yeah, that's another thing. I have done a couple of speaking events, and I don't really do debates because they're not really something I'm particularly good at. But uh, when I have, I often have these like young like guys coming up to me afterwards, like 18-ish age, and they're not fully politically formed. Like, I mean, they're coming into contact with these ideas a lot of the time for the first time, and but they're in this world where they're kind of listening to people like Peterson and the stuff well to the right of Peterson, we'll just say. But what I found is that they were like sponges. Like, I was talking to them about different thinkers on the left that have influenced me. They never heard of any of them. And like one of them was like taking them down on his phone. He was like asking me to, I was giving them reading lists, basically, and so they're like very interested. They do, like, a lot of them are just like very interested in being able to have a debate about anything really in a kind of an open way. And they are just being like needlessly vilified and shut down if they put a foot wrong in any direction. And
yeah, it's even more than that. I think it's because it's also if there's something about you, and you've got a sense of kind of independence and a desire to very basically control your own life, you're gonna just, if you've got those kinds of instincts, you're gonna be able to smell bullshit, and you're gonna react badly to being told what to think and what to do, and then everyone's gonna say, "Well, you're right wing then," and you're gonna be okay, okay, I'm right wing.
That's me then. Yeah.
Let me go and
I was looking for an identity. Now I've got one. Yeah.
Yeah, or you start thinking, may as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another thing too is that, and this is something that immediately when I thought of when this thought occurred to me, I thought of the what the Twitter reaction would be to even saying it, which is terrible, is in my head now, which is that I noticed I taught a little bit, not very much, just like adjunct, like temporary stuff. And my, I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but my experience of teaching was that I noticed a general difference between boys and girls, which was that a lot of the young men tend to work their way through ideas by first just adopting a really extreme position and arguing it. And they'll have a completely different position a year later. But the way they go through, like, deciding if something is right or not is like testing it out in that way. And so I think that is misinterpreted a lot of the time, or it's not seen as an opportunity for, just like changing people's ideas. I think that young women are much more likely to be cautious about aligning themselves with some kind of obscure ideology or, something like that. I think that young men are much more likely to test out ideas in that way by seemingly very confidently and boldly stating a position, when in actual fact they may not really hold it very firmly, and they may be convinced to change their idea very quickly.
Yeah.
But a few months later, they'll be really boldly stating the opposite position to somebody else.
Well, I was once a young man, and
we're all, by that reckoning, we're all still young men on this podcast. So that's great. That's great news for us.
You know what I mean? You'll have like a 16-year-old saying, "Well, as a Titoist."
No, I mean, all joking aside, I think you're absolutely right. It is some. I mean, you've described something accurately that I'm aware of, but haven't really processed as such. As seeing it myself in higher education, and also speaking to my own experience. I mean, I vacillated, vacillated is the wrong word, but bounced around between a variety of hard political positions in over the years. I mean, stabilized now, obviously, in Aufhebunga, but before that, definitely. And it's a really interesting observation. And like you say, I can exactly see why you'd be cautious about putting it on Twitter, because it is the kind of point that would attract all the morons in their thousands.
I think you need to remember that there are some people who really want there to be like incipient or kind of proto-fascists and want these kind of young men who are expressing opinions in quite a, trying them out sort of way to really be quite far right wing. And those are people whose liberalism needs to be, I don't know, morally kind of verified by these, there being a real threat of a fascist menace. Whereas I think it is more accurate that a lot of the time it's people trying out ideas by expressing them and then realizing the weaknesses and the contradictions when people push back and say, like, that's not correct, or even in just expounding them, realizing
it's like a mirror image, right? You have the kind of the Rousseauist progressive liberals using the specter of fascism to self-justify and kind of reinforce their own ideas. And you have the kind of classical liberal wing of liberalism, which we call the right, the mainstream right, using the specter of Stalinism, the left authoritarianism to do exactly the same thing. If we don't stay within the parameters of these kind of, let's say, left-right divisions within liberalism, these sinister forces from outside will emerge. So we must, never budge.
And I mean, there's also we end up creating people create the dystopias that they want, right?
Yeah.
And that those dystopias serve a purpose, and so the incipient fascism is can be a useful one for people, as well as incipient cultural Marxist takeover, for that matter as well.